are the right words to use in this particular situation. I'm done.
Good morning. Welcome into First Take. Thank you for being with us in what could be a landmark day in the NFL. A number of voices will be joining us discussing the controversy in the NFL. Keyshawn Johnson here with us. Good to see you, sir. Stephen A. Smith. Gentlemen, not the day for pleasantries and hee-hee-ha-ha, so let's get right to it. I know this is very important to you both. Former Dolphins coach Brian Flores is suing the NFL, 3 teams alleging racism and lack of integrity in hiring practices. In a 58-page lawsuit filed in Manhattan federal court Tuesday that seeks class action status, Flores alleges discrimination regarding his interview processes with the Broncos and Giants and his firing last month by the Dolphins. Flores says Dolphins owner Stephen Ross attempted to incentivize him every game the team lost that season. Flores says that as the team won games late in the season, Dolphins GM Chris Greer told him Ross was mad that Flores' on-field success was compromising the team's draft position. Flores also says Ross pressured him into recruiting a prominent quarterback at the end of the 2019 season, which Flores refused so as not to violate the NFL's rules on tampering. He also alleges the Giants interviewed him last month for their head coaching vacancy for no other reason than compliance with the NFL's Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview minority candidates for their open positions. The rule says in part that teams must hold an in-person interview with at least one external minority candidate for any GM or head coaching opening. Here's Flores earlier on Get Up with Mike Greenberg.
We need change. That was the number one reason. And I know there's a sacrifice, there's risk to that, but at the end of the day, we need change. We need change. I know many very capable black coaches, some of my staff who I know if given an opportunity or when given an opportunity, are going to go and do a great job on their interview. And I would just hate for that to be a waste. And I think, we need to change the hearts and minds of the people making those decisions.
In response to the lawsuit, the NFL released the following statement. The NFL and our clubs are deeply committed to ensuring equitable employment practices and continue to make progress in providing equitable opportunities throughout our organizations. Diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and our internal leadership teams spend more time. We will defend against these claims, which are without merit. On that note, I would like to welcome in our NFL insider, Adam Schefter. Adam, good morning to you, and thank you for being with us. Please tell me this. What type of action should we expect from the league following the allegations made by Flores?
Well, you saw the league release a statement yesterday saying that this lawsuit had no merit in the league's estimation. Now, again, it was a little early to say no merit, but that's what the league said, and that's what it believed. And I would imagine that there'll be many conversations that go on between lawyers for the National Football League and lawyers for Brian Flores. And Molly, it comes at an interesting time where the lawsuit was filed in Manhattan on a day where Brian Flores was interviewing for the head coaching job of the New Orleans Saints at a time when he's a finalist for the Houston Texans head coaching job. And so you can see the courageous stand that this is and how much that must have taken from him to be able to file this suit at a time when you were under consideration for at least 2 head coaching jobs, knowing that you could be sacrificing your coaching career. But you heard Brian Flores, you heard what this means, you heard how frustrated and humiliated he was, and he just felt like he couldn't stay silent any longer.
Adam Schefter, I only asked this question to you because you're so plugged in. When the National Football League says there is no merit to this lawsuit that has been filed by Brian Flores, are they talking about themselves, or are they talking about the 3 teams he included in the lawsuit as well as them?
Stephen, I don't know the answer to that. I would just say I was surprised to see that particular language used at that time rather than something like, we take this very seriously and we will look into it. Something along those lines rather than to dismiss it. Now, the Denver Broncos released their statement and they had long, lengthy, detailed notes of their meeting with Brian Flores. The New York Giants released their own statement. And it was interesting last night, and I have no idea whether Brian Flores is right or wrong. He's a man of principle and a man of honor, and I believe him if this is what he says. But last night somebody pointed out to me that when the Pittsburgh Steelers were going through their last head coaching hiring exercise, that everybody at that point in time expected Russ Grimm to be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the anointed coach. He was the guy that everybody expected. And on the very last interview, Mike Tomlin stepped in, blew away the Steelers, and got hired as the head coach. And that is sometimes how this can work in the hiring practice, where a team is thinking of going a certain direction and winds up going in a different direction because of the strength of the interview. Now, clearly, the texts from Bill Belichick are what they are, and the language is pretty clear. And Brian Flores felt the way that he did upon receiving those texts that were meant for Brian Daboll. So you can only imagine how difficult it is to process that. But just in general, I can tell you that sometimes these searches and interviews do go down to the end, and minds do shift and opinions are made. But again, the results are the results. And right now, there's one black head coach in the National Football League. One. And something's got to be done to change that.
Absolutely. Adam, before we let you go, I understand that he's still in the mix for a couple positions. So how will this lawsuit affect Flores' candidacy for NFL head coaching vacancies currently?
Well, I think some people might say now, how can you hire Brian Flores with this lawsuit going on, him suing the National Football League? I would flip it the other way around, and I would say, what a brilliant move it would be for the Houston Texans, who already are maligned, to go hire Brian Flores at a time like this. What better move could a franchise like that make at this time? And maybe it's easy for me to say that just sitting in my chair. But if you're the Houston Texans, what other move can you make that will be as popular and as well received and as lauded as that one? Now, Jonathan Gannon's going to be a head coach one day, the Eagles defense coordinator, and Josh McCown, I think, is going to be a great head coach one day and has got the respect of a lot of people around the league. But in the climate we're in the times we're in, with the relationships that the Texans already have with Brian Flores, knowing the type of man he is, knowing the type of coach he is, how simple would it be to make that hire? And how much praise would they get for that move?
Yeah, especially after how the David Culley situation was handled. Adam, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you later. Appreciate all the context and perspective.
Thank you.
Now I want to bring in Keyshawn and Stephen A. I just want to mention, guys, the Giants, Dolphins, and Broncos all have denied these allegations and put out statements. Stephen A., I'll start with you. Your reaction to all of this, and I know we're unpacking a lot here.
There's a lot to unpack, and we've got the entire show to do that, so I'm going to
Oh, excuse me one second. Jeff Saturday also joining us. Jeff, thank you for being with us.
Oh, glad to be here.
All right. There's a lot to unpack, and we'll spend the next, 2 hours or so doing just that. Let me get a couple of things out of the way. Incredible props to Brian Flores from the standpoint of courage, because it takes a lot of courage to do what he's doing, and clearly he's not doing it just for himself. He is in pursuit with a class action lawsuit, basically inviting other coaches to come in and maybe and likely express themselves and show how the conditions which he feels that he's been subjected to is similar to what a lot of black coaches have been going through for quite some time. And we all know what my position has been as it pertains to African-American coaches, particularly in the National Football League. In college football is just as, if not more egregious, at least until recently. The NFL, what I've reminded people over the last few weeks, Keyshawn, is that the Rooney Rule was instituted in 2003. When the Rooney Rule was instituted, essentially compelling you to at least interview African-American coaches and give them something close to a fair and equitable opportunity, there were 3 African-American coaches in the National Football League. We are 19 years removed from the institution and implementation of the Rooney Rule, and there is now 1 head coach. There have been about 7 or 8 openings this offseason for NFL head coaches. 5 people have been hired. None of them have been black as a head coach. And so when we look at it from that perspective, it is clearly alarming. Now, let me get down to this. There are people that are saying Brian Flores doesn't have much of a case. You heard the National Football League say it's meritless. I'm not buying that one bit. I'm familiar with court proceedings and what have you, and there's something called summary judgment. And I believe that man is going to get past that. He is going to get past summary judgment, and there is going to be some explanations that the NFL is going to be required to disseminate. Bottom line. Number 1. Number 2, the New York Giants, we don't know the facts. We have to hold out. But let me say this to the New York Giants. As an organization, when it comes to black coaches, I don't believe a damn word you have to say. There's nobody more incriminating than the New York Giants. We are in the year 2022, okay? All of these years, damn near a century for crying out loud. Football has a century. Football has existed. There's one franchise that has not had one single black coach. That is the New York Giants. And we don't even want to get started. I know you had a black GM, but you have never hired a black coach. When you're talking about 53 men on a roster, practice squad, and everything like that, basically you're talking about you don't trust an African-American to be a leader of men. That's the Giants organization, okay? So nobody's giving you the benefit of the doubt. You better be able to prove something, and that's something else. Denver Broncos, different matter, okay? When you're talking about Don Elway being disheveled and looking the way that he looked and accusing him of being inebriated or whatever the case may be, I'm not getting into all of that. What I will say to you is this, Key. The most damning thing that was said that I peeled from this lawsuit is Stephen Ross, the owner for the Miami Dolphins, the guy that has this organization. I want to make sure I look it up. Just remember the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality. Okay, this is what Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, has created. He's contributed millions upon millions of dollars to the cause on behalf of African Americans. And you hired Brian Flores. You have a black GM in Chris Greer. And that is the guy that is being accused in a lawsuit of going up to Brian Flores and encouraging him to throw games, to lose games on purpose, and even offering him $100,000 for every game that he lost. If that is found to be true, Stephen Ross can no longer be an owner for an NFL franchise. He's got to go. If that is true, and only if that is true, he's got to go. You talking about compromising the integrity of competition? He would be in flagrant violation of that. There would be no excuse to keep him on as an owner. And oh, by the way, it would open up an avenue that Brian Flores clearly is interested in broaching, and that's in getting minority ownership, meaning black ownership in the NFL. There's plenty of owners that don't own the team by themselves. They got a group that all put in their money, and there's enough black folks around that want to have an ownership stake in an NFL franchise. And one of the ways to make that happen is Stephen Ross being gone. I'm not encouraging him to be gone, Keyshawn, if this isn't true. But if this is true, Stephen Ross has got to go. He cannot stay on as owner of a National Football League team.
Keyshawn, before you jump in, I just want to say one thing. The Giants, and I'm a fan of the Giants, obviously, also the last team to start a black quarterback as well, and that was Geno Smith. Key?
Well, look, in terms of the Miami Dolphins, I think we all know, Jeff Saturday, myself, and others who played the game, coaches coach to win. They don't coach to lose football games at all. I understand you wanted the tank to get a better quarterback, a better draft position, but that wasn't going to clearly happen with Brian Flores because he didn't do it. The team started off poor, as you can see, but then they eventually got better over time because they fought for him. So that just goes to show you right there the character of Brian Flores and his ability to get those guys to play for him. Now, in terms of the Giants situation, I don't know enough about it. There's more to come out clearly in this situation. But if somebody is going to run a class action lawsuit against the NFL and other 32 teams in the National Football League, he certainly has something. There's something there that does not sit right. We can look at it, Stephen A. and Jeff, in recent history in the National Football League. People are paired together. General managers are paired with coaches that they hire, whether it's John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, whether it's what just happened with the Raiders, the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott along with Brandon Beane. And now you're looking at the Giants situation when they came over from Buffalo. Now, all of a sudden, Brian Dable becomes a head coach. He was essentially, in my opinion, a dead man walking as a head coach, Brian Flores, even though he did the Zoom interview on that Monday and was scheduled on that Thursday and got the text messages from Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick would have texted me the same thing if I would have been hired. Congratulations, Keyshawn. All Bill Belichick was doing was congratulating one of his former assistants, not realizing it was the wrong assistant head coach. So we know there's a lot to uncover here, like Stephen A. said, and we'll eventually get to it because this story is just beginning. It is nowhere near the end.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, listen, man, I think the thing that kind of gets lost in this is we have a guy, Brian Flores, who has strong has integrity, character traits. Like everybody who's played for him has come out and talked about, man, how much they love playing for B-Flow and the type of man he is. I was on with Rob Ninkovich on Get Up, and he said it as well as you can say it about how this man met him at 5 a.m. to do the extra to get up to stand on the table to keep Rob in the league. And we as players understand how difficult this must have been, how helpless he must have felt. Because, men, he's still got 2 opportunities to be a head coach. How helpless do you have to feel to file a lawsuit against the 32 people who basically hold your job certainty in their hands and say something has to change, that there's nothing else I can do to make this fair, that I have to say this? I mean, I can't imagine how helpless he had to feel as a person, because, again, this is a guy, man, he coached for Belichick. He's been a head coach. He understands the hard work. When he came out of Boston College and became a coach immediately, 18 or almost 20 years, I guess now, he's been in this league. He understands the game, man. Like, this I ain't ready to work. I don't want to, this man understands what it takes to be successful in the NFL, and he had the Dolphins 2 winning seasons moving that direction, and to be asked your first year to tank it and still pull through and push through all those things, I just can't imagine how difficult this decision was for him. And you can tell by an interview he had with Greeny earlier, he wants change. Like the things he asked about, it's not just monetary. Everybody thinks he's not just monetary. This is about changing the hiring practices of being able to be transparent in the interview process. What was said, what wasn't said, what did I do right, what did I not do right, when was the decision made by the team, and all of those things just to equal the playing field so he feels like those things aren't shams. And we all know by the numbers that we see, whether it's offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, general managers, presidents of the team, or head coaches, that black coaches are not represented. I mean, like it doesn't take anybody, it's not a genius to open your eyes and go, something ain't right. And so if this is the case that says, hey, here's the actual hard evidence, which I'm sure is going to have to be worked out in court. And again, all these are ifs, and I 100% understand. You have to there has to be evidence, discovery, all those things were in the legal. I cannot imagine Brian Flores making these accusations without substantial evidence, with a man that has been in this game as long as he has been as successful as he has, putting his career at risk. And all the other men that he's asking to do the same, I do not think it's meritless. And for the NFL to come out and respond as quickly as they did, I think, again, is a bad look, right? So talk about, hey, we have to go back and look at this. We're going to go back and investigate all those things. And I want to say one more thing before we move on. When you think about Roger Goodell, Jeff Pash, Troy Vincent, the guys in the NFL offices on Park Avenue, this ain't them, y'all. Like we can all try to blame Goodell. This is not a Goodell issue. He has instituted, Troy Vincent, Jeff Pash, they have instituted pipelines and try to create programs to help get this process even, and what can they do to help manage these things. And you can't tell an owner who to hire. So you can't blame Goodell. This has to go to those owners, because ultimately they're the ones making the decisions. This is not on Goodell, Pash, Troy Vincent. They're doing all they can do, and they're trying to create an equal playing field for coaches to get jobs, and it's going to require transparency. And again, owners to step out and hire guys who we know are more than qualified to run teams and organizations and companies, however you want to look at it. But I can just say, man, I feel for Brian. I feel for his family, because this could not have been an easy decision. And again, he's still a finalist in 2 teams, whether it's the Saints. I know he's still a finalist, I believe, with the Texans, and I'm hoping he gets a job, because again, he has earned the opportunity to continue coaching at the head coaching level in the NFL. I hope now is the time.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And obviously, you spent years in the Players Association and dealing with the labor negotiation. So excellent perspective there. You'll be back with us in just a minute. We'll keep this moving forward in a sport that is predominantly black. There is only one black head coach, and that is Mike Tomlin. The Rooney Rule is currently failing us. 4 of the open NFL head coaching jobs this offseason have been filled, none by minority coaches, with 4 jobs remaining. Aside from Josh McDaniels, none of the coaches hired so far have previous head coaching experience. Let me repeat that. None of them have head coaching experience. On that note, the ESPN family has just received an upgrade, and that would be Angela Rye. Congratulations. Welcome to the ESPN family.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
She'll be with us. Excellent to have you, and the network needs your voice, so it's great to have you, especially here today on this issue. Angela, I'll start with you. How will this lawsuit impact black coaches?
Well, I want to start with how it will impact the whole of America, not even just Black America. The fact that this lawsuit was filed on the first day of Black History Month, and the fact that he went ahead courageously and said, I'm going to speak up for me. This morning when he was on air, he talked about speaking up for his kids. This was a courageous lawsuit where he calls on the ancestors in point 1 of the complaint. He talks about Martin Luther King. There's a quote from Martin Luther King at the beginning. Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass, Jackie Robinson, and Mamie Till. And we all know the historic nature of this year for Jackie Robinson. The fact that the NFL is struggling to integrate everywhere else besides on stages during the halftime show. And if you're not running the ball down the field, that is highly problematic. We're in 2022 where we've broken all types of barriers in this country. And we are talking about a rule that has failed to fulfill the needs of black coaches, coordinators, executives, GMs. It's failing. And at some point they have to decide whether they're going to continue to engage in window dressing or if they're going to ensure that this rule actually has real implications and impact. The biggest problem we have is in addition to the hiring practices, they're not retaining the coaches.
Yes.
And they're being let go at a much stricter standard than anyone else, winning records, and they're still being let go. So I think the other important point, and I want to get to the heart of this lawsuit, is that it alleges violation of Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. That prohibits racial discrimination in any type of employment contracts. The NFL is going to have a really difficult time with this very damning text from Bill Belichick, with all of the evidence that we have, just the data. We don't have to get into the emotions of it. The data's there, and the data is on the side of Coach Flores.
If somebody says, Angela, and welcome to the family.
Thank you.
If somebody says, okay, if you look at the NFL league office, it's relatively diverse. They've got a lot of diversity within their office. The problem is really not with them. It's with the owners, and the owners are the bosses of the commission. They're the bosses of the commissioner, Roger Goodell. How do you answer that in terms of somebody in the NFL saying, I mean, they're not going to say this publicly, but it's really not us. It's the owners. It's not us. The league office has been pushing the Rooney Rule. The league office has been pushing that agenda. We've been about our business in regards to that, but these owners won't comply. If they try to separate themselves from the owners, how is that something that Brian Flores can fight?
Well, and this is the thing. One of the things I also commend him on in this lawsuit is he gives recommendations for how the hiring table should look. Players shouldn't be involved in that. We know, again, 70% of the league's players are black. They shouldn't be involved in the hiring decisions. If the owners are going to refuse accountability from this overall thing called the NFL, that's something where the NFL now has to hold them accountable. Otherwise, they're going to continue to be faced with these kinds of lawsuits. And if the data doesn't shift, they're going to continue to lose them.
When you look at Bill Belichick's text messages, there will be people out there that will say, well, he just texting a friend. How does that help Brian in his case, even though the names were switched? Most people believe Bill Belichick is dialed into the National Football League, so the information that he receives most likely is accurate.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think the reality of it is when you look at, they start the lawsuit with this, sorry, I effed this up. I double-checked and misread the text. I think they are naming Brian Daboll. I'm sorry about that. Right? This is the last text message that Brian Flores receives from Coach Belichick. This is all the evidence he really needs to prove this because his interview was 3 days after this text message was received. So we don't have to interpret anything. It's in black and white. I think the other thing, Stephen A., going back to your point regarding the hiring practices, when you look at, he literally has like a Facebook of general managers, of the owners, of coaches in the NFL, and it's Snow White. It's inexcusable. He has that pictures of everyone in this lawsuit. It's very well documented, very well done. If they want to demonstrate pattern and practice of racially discriminatory behavior, they have that. They have that.
Angela, real quick, doesn't there need to be transparency in this decision making for there to be progress in the Rooney Rule on why they chose these candidates and making that public for the black coaches, why they're not getting these jobs?
Well, they can say whatever they want, but the reality of it is if these interviews are conducted after they've already made a hiring decision, just like they did with this New York Giants issue, it's going to continue to be a problem. The Rooney Rule has to be applied in a way. Here's what really has to happen. And again, he quotes Dr. King at the beginning of this lawsuit. We're not just shifting rules, we have to shift minds and hearts. And as long as they're interviewing with people who don't believe they're capable, coming to, in the Denver Broncos interview, an hour late, appearing to look like they're disheveled and drunk, right? That is a real issue.
But explain to me how that's a real issue, because I was out late last night. My alarm clock didn't work. I came. I had some drinks with some friends.
You're not, you're not respecting the interview.
No, we just talking about plausible deniability what somebody could throw out there in that regard in the Denver Broncos.
How you going to go against that? Because I'm sure John Elway and his brass are saying, we was out to dinner, we had some drinks. We showed up to the interview.
Yeah, sure.
They showed up to
the interview. And you know what? I wasn't there, Keyshawn. But here's what I know. That more often than not, this is how black coaches are being treated in the interview process. More often than not, this is how offensive and defensive coordinators are being treated in the interview process. More often than not, the NFL has applied the Rooney Rule since 2003, and what do we have to show for it, right? So that's the truth of it.
So essentially, they show up and don't take it serious because it's a black man. They wouldn't do that the same if it was a white coach.
Perhaps. And the one thing that we can also say is it appears that there's an explicit bias issue, right, within the league. But we know for sure there's an implicit bias issue.
Let me say this. First of all, let me just give an opinion real quick and just throw it out the way. I'll get into the Giants and the Dolphins quickly in just a second. Denver's a shaky situation because we keep forgetting that before Vic Fangio was the coach, it was a guy named Vance Joseph. It was a black man. John Elway and the Denver Broncos organization just had a black coach. They just hired a black head coach before they let him go and brought in Vic Fangio. So that's going to be something that they could throw to their defense. That's number one. Number two, tardiness or whatever the case may be. Plausible deniability. I think that's something that they could get away with. I don't know if you're Stephen Ross telling them to throw games, offering $100,000, I think that's far more incriminating. The New York Giants and their history of not hiring black head coaches, that's definitely incriminating, particularly when you got the text from Bill Belichick to Brian Flores showing what he was hearing because he's so plugged in. And 3 days before its interview, I definitely think that's something that's going to work in Brian Flores' favor on those 2 points. My question to you, Angela Rye, knowing you the way that I do, would be this. I want to know, of all the things that are being said and all the things that Brian Flores says that he wants accomplished from this lawsuit, what's the number one thing you think will happen, and what's the number one thing you want to happen?
Well, the thing that I think will happen is they're going to have to settle, just again off of this text message exchange alone. Like, it's very, very clear that hiring process in particular was thrown. I understand that what you all are saying about the subjectivity around the Denver Broncos. I'll table that, but what I will say is he also has data on his side. One statistic that hasn't been talked about this much this morning is in the 20 years of the Rooney Rule, only 15 black coaches were hired out of 129 vacancies. That's the part. And I know you're talking about Stephen Ross and the incriminating nature of throwing the games. That is a part of this lawsuit. But the major part of this lawsuit that he has to prove is racial discriminatory intent, right, in an employment contract. They have the data for that. So what I'm hoping for is that the NFL comes to terms with the fact that it has some severe racial inequities that have to be addressed. The data shows it. They need to admit it.
Well, they also helped by Troy Vincent, the executive VP of the NFL, being on the record in public, Washington Post interviews, along with being on my show, Stephen A's World, and saying this is a problem. So they've got people within the NFL office saying this is an issue. But I think that's damning to the owners as it pertains to the league office if the executive VP is saying The league owners got to address this because we're trying. I think that helps the NFL office, doesn't help the owners.
Angela.
No, it doesn't help the owners, but it helps what we should all be striving for, which is racial justice and equity in this organization. It's triggering, as a black woman, to hear things like, well, one of the statements that came out yesterday was, we picked the most qualified person, the New York Giants. Why is it that we're always unqualified? This man had a winning record with the Miami Dolphins. That shouldn't even come into question.
Andrew Davis has never been the head coach.
Yeah, they were 1-7 and then turned it around to 8-1. That's never happened in NFL history this past season. Last question I have for you, and then Keyshawn, jump in here. What if Flores never gets a job in the NFL again? What if it's a similar situation to Colin Kaepernick? How do the players respond to that?
You know, I hope that they will stand up in solidarity with Brian Flores. He said this morning that no matter what, it's worth it. He's thinking about his kids. He's thinking about ancestors who came before him. I applaud his courage. This is a major, major step. It's something that was absolutely needed. Again, he has all of the data. I hope that the players will step up and say this is the right thing.
Oh, we'll get into the players. We'll get into the players today. I'll deal with that today.
Angela, you mentioned lawsuit, right? Settle. If you settle this lawsuit, how is that moving things forward for what you want to do? Because it's not monetary, right? It's not about money.
Right.
So how are you settling? What are you settling for?
So to be clear, he actually is suing for damages, compensatory and punitive damages. So there is money involved. But with the settlement, what I'm hoping for is that they would acknowledge the wrong behavior that's been documented thoroughly throughout this 58-page lawsuit. And then in addition to that, that they would say, and we're striving to make changes. The hiring committee process that Brian Flores recommends in this lawsuit as a solution is a great one. And I think finally, there has to be another system set up for accountability in the NFL. Stephen A. has talked about it, articulately saying that the NFL is saying we have this right, but the owners will not cooperate. That's something that has to shift immediately. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same loop for another 20 years.
Just want to make sure, because the audience, you brought up Martin Luther King, how it was in, they got a statement, a quote
in the top of the
quote to start off this class action complaint. The quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, just so everybody knows, morals cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. The law cannot make an employer love me, but it can keep him from refusing to hire me because of the color of my skin. That is the quote she has been alluding to when she's talked about.
I think that's a perfect way to end this segment. Again, Angela's been a friend of the show, joining us quite a bit during the pandemic, and honor to have you on our team.
Thank you.
First of many appearances.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being with us. I know you have things to do now. We'll keep it rolling here. Still to come on First Take. Hired. Included in the lawsuit is allegedly a series of text messages from New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick to Flores, congratulating him on landing the Giants job. Here's the alleged exchange. We're going to pull that up for you. Belichick texting, sounds like you've landed. Congrats. Flores responding, did you hear something? I didn't. Belichick adding Giants. Flores responding, I interviewed on Thursday. I think I have a shot at it. Belichick texting, got it. I hear from Buffalo and the Giants that you are their guy. Hope it works out if you want it to. Flores responding, that's definitely what I want. I hope you're right, coach. Thank you. And then adds, coach, are you talking to Brian Flores or Brian Dable? Just making sure. Belichick responding, sorry, I messed this up. I double checked and misread the text. I think they are naming Dable. Sorry about that. BB. Here's Flores moments ago on Get Up with Greeny.
When you first realized the mistake he had made, what was your first reaction?
Disbelief, humiliation. That was a tough pill to swallow. I was upset that I wasn't getting a true opportunity to show what I can do, to show what I can bring to a team, which I feel is a lot. Those text messages confirmed a lot of what a lot of us, black minority coaches already feel. That we're going into these, and they're shams. It confirmed that. There's a belief in, look, that was just a mistake by Belichick. We've all sent the wrong text message to somebody. But in this instance, it came to me, and it was almost, it was confirmation that those backroom dealings were happening.
Okay, Stephen A., I'll start with you. So how does Belichick look in all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that's trying to make Belichick look bad. I don't necessarily agree with that. He has a relationship clearly with Brian Dable. He has a relationship with Brian Flores.
They both work for him.
Listen, here's the issue that I think people are confusing. Bill Belichick comes across as an older curmudgeon type dude that's a bit acerbic and abrasive at times with members of the media. I've always debunked that because when I see him at a Boston Celtics game, the man could never be kinder. He can never be kinder. He's absolutely a pleasant person to go and speak to and talk to. It's just that he got a problem with people asking him about the Patriots during the season. That's all it's the media. But people mistake that to assume that he don't have relationships, and he's got a whole bunch of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember years ago, the great, legendary Jim Brown. He's made several appearances on my shows throughout the years when I had my own television show, quite frankly, and radio show and all the stuff. I've known Jim Brown for years, love him to death. Jim Brown has a very, very, very close relationship with Bill Belichick. And there's a lot of black players that have a very close relationship with Bill Belichick. And so this notion that, you know what, what's he doing talking about it? What's he trying to say? Or he knew, well, he's connected. So that's going to help Brian Flores' case. But in the end, I don't think it makes Bill Belichick look bad. All he was doing was reaching out and congratulating somebody. Here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. And it's the one, I can get into a lot of things because I'm very proud of Brian Flores and what he's doing, and I stand with him. We can get into matters later about the strategic portion of things, which I got questions about and stuff like that, which we will in this show. My only question is, damn, when you reveal private text messages, that makes people uncomfortable. Because when you do stuff like that, I'm just saying, you know how it is when it comes to us. And I say this, and I'll say this for. I always say this, Keyshawn, and then I'll stop. White people come to work. I've told white folks this. You come to work with a job to do every day. Black folks come with a responsibility. Because you got people in your community. You got to say this, you got to say that. Make sure you do this, make sure you do that. Texting me all damn morning, telling me what to say like they on first take. This is what black folks do. We do that with each other, and it's all love. It's all love. And I get that. But the other part about it, Key, is that when you black, they're looking for a reason not to hire you.
Yeah.
Whereas with whites, they're willing to embrace reasons to hire you.
I understand.
We understand that. And so when you show yourself to be someone willing to reveal private text messages, that is the kind of things that make people reluctant and hesitant to talk to you, and you never know. Now, this
But I don't think they were damning, Stephen A. I don't think they were damning to Belichick.
All gloves is off at this point, so
I feel you.
It doesn't really matter.
For the greater
cause. For the greater cause.
I'm just talking about how Bill Belichick.
But Bill Belichick certainly would understand why he disclosed the text message.
You know Bill Belichick.
There's no phone number there at all.
Right.
Bill Belichick would text me the same thing if I was being hired.
Right.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, prior to this, I had a text exchange going on because I was trying to make sure to him to get on the show about Tom Brady. Right. So, look, Bill Belichick knows a lot of people in the National Football League. He is connected to the New York Giants, regardless.
Right.
He knows those owners.
Yeah.
They were there when he was there.
Right.
They're going to communicate with people like that. Hey, what do you think? As they do their background checks, Brian Dable coached with Bill Belichick for a short stint. He coached down in Alabama with Nick Saban. There's relationships there. There's antennas that connect.
Yeah.
So you're going to have those sort of things. Where Bill made the mistake, and he admitted to it,
got confused.
He got confused.
Yeah, he thought he was talking to Brian Flores.
Next time,
Brian Dable when he was talking to Brian Flores.
you put the last name on there and not just have Brian.
Yeah.
Right.
In the end, this is going to drag Bill Belichick in.
Yes.
Because of the depositions and all the different things they want to know.
What
else do you know other than what these text messages are?
That's where I was going.
Where are the rest of the text messages?
Right.
You know, we only seen this one. Where's the exchange from you and the New York Giants individual or whatever individual you got that information from? Maybe it didn't come from the Giants. Maybe it came from somebody else that's connected to the Giants. But it starts to have a snowball effect.
That's when discovery takes place.
And that's when the discovery part of it takes place. But as far as Bill Belichick goes, he's not egregious. He's not hiding things and playing games with Brian Flores at all.
Yeah.
Do you think this will have any effect on Bill Belichick's legacy?
No.
Wait. You don't know where I'm going with this. In a positive way. Because this botched exchange could change history. This could be a landmark moment.
What would it do to his legacy? His legacy is already written in stone. He's the greatest coach that I've ever seen.
That he was a part of changing the game in terms of the
but by
rule
accident.
and integrity.
But by accident, and people will recognize that because it
Still
wasn't
something he could be
it wasn't
remembered
like
for.
you stood. It wasn't like you stood up or anything. You were just communicating with people within the football fraternity,
Exactly.
congratulating a couple of one coach mistakenly.
And if Brian Flores was actually the coach that the Giants hired, he would have texted Brian Flores.
It's the same message.
He'd have did the same thing to him.
Yeah.
I Stanley believe firmly that would have took place.
Yes.
Because that's what they do. You know, I talked to a coach the other day that's currently a coach in the National Football League who's black. Called me, former teammate of mine. He said, "Key, man, what you think?" I said, "What you want to do?" He says, I don't know if I want to go do this interview." So I told him, I said, "Man, you need to still do that interview because you never know what might happen." Now, if you ask me, I kind of know who they're going to hire already. And he thinks he knows too. And this was way before Brian Flores. But I told him, I said, what's it going to hurt? Think Mike Tomlin for a minute. Just think Mike Tomlin. What is it actually going to hurt?
Blew the house down.
You go in there and you going to blow them away.
Well, let me say this. Let me respond to that. That depends on who you are and what your particular situation is. If you are a brother that doesn't get any shine, any recognition whatsoever, you should take the interview. If you are a brother that's been through 7, 8, or 9 of them,
yes,
and it's just a process that they throw you the resident dude that they throw out there just to interview, and you've done this over and over again. Nah, you shouldn't do that.
Yes.
You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't just take the interview just to appease these owners who want to show the league they're fulfilling Rooney Rule rules and obligations, and that's all this is. So it does depend on the situation, but getting back to Brian Flores, I understand the gloves are off at this point. I understand this case is a big, big deal. It's a class action lawsuit for crying out loud, okay? And you're inviting other coaches to get involved in all of this, and we'll see what happens and what the courts allow. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying to you, what concerns me is that when you reveal private text messages, it's one thing if you got the lawsuit against Bill Belichick, but Bill Belichick is actually an innocent bystander in all of this.
Yeah.
He was simply congratulating
Stephen A., time out. This is just the beginning.
I know that.
There's going to be
that's why I'm saying.
tons of text messages that are going to be made
what
public.
you're saying is we might be facing a Washington situation, so to speak, where all of a sudden the emails, everybody wants to see all the text messages now, opposed to the emails. And they want to see everything.
You have an issue with breaking trust, right?
No, the issue is, well, it's not my issue. I mean, I don't have an issue with this at all because I support what Brian Flores is doing. But I think it's important.
I understand what you're saying.
I just think it's important that everybody recognize that the NFL community, when they talking to black dudes, I mean, every I's dotted, every T's crossed, suddenly you ain't texting dudes. You ain't trying to talk to them like that because you're saying, we don't know what they're going to do because you revealed a private text message. And this don't have anything to do with Bill Belichick, but he's going to be caught in the middle of it. And people don't want that heat. They don't want to deal with that. So now there's another roadblock, another impediment, another excuse for them to do what they really want to do. And I'm just saying, be mindful of that.
We're up against it. Last word here.
Brian Flores, his character alone feels a certain way. He feels a certain way. This makes his case stronger.
I agree.
He had to put that in his lawsuit. Had to. Couldn't leave it out.
So much more on this. Still to come on First Take. We'll keep discussing the lawsuit filed by Brian Flores on the NFL and its teams. And former Bengals coach Marvin Lewis will join the show live. He will provide his perspective. Looking forward to that. And how should the players respond? Stephen A. weighs in on. Still to come on First Take, a lawsuit filed by Brian Flores against the National Football League. How should the players respond? RG3 joins the show for an impactful conversation. And where do the Giants and the Dolphins stand now? Two teams at the center of allegations of the lawsuit. So much more on a pivotal day in the history of the NFL. Now more on our lead story. Former Dolphins coach Brian Flores is suing the NFL. 3 teams allegedly accusing them of racism and lack of integrity in hiring practices in a 58-page lawsuit filed in Manhattan federal court Tuesday that seeks class action status. Flores alleges discrimination regarding his interview processes with the Broncos and Giants and his firing last month by the Dolphins. Flores says Dolphins owner Stephen Ross attempted to incentivize him to tank or purposely lose games shortly after he was hired in 2019, with Ross allegedly offering Flores $100,000 for every game the team lost that season. Flores says that as the team won games late in the season, Dolphins GM Chris Greer told him that Ross was mad that Flores' on-field success was compromising the team's draft position. Flores also says Ross pressured him into recruiting a prominent quarterback at the end of 2019 season, which Flores refused so as to not violate the NFL's rules on tampering. Flores alleged the Giants, interviewed him last month for their head coaching vacancy for no other reason than compliance with the NFL's Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview minority candidates for their open positions. The rule says in part that teams must hold an in-person interview with at least one external minority candidate for any GM or head coach opening. Here's Flores earlier on Get Up.
We need change. That was the number one reason. And I know there's a sacrifice, there's risk to that, but at the end of the day, we need change. That was just a mistake by Belichick. We've all sent the wrong text message to somebody. But in this instance, it came to me, and it was almost, it was confirmation that those backroom dealings were happening. The league's filled with 70% of black players. I know there are capable coaches in this league to lead teams. I have some on my staff. I know the majority of them, I would say. I know what kind of integrity and character and leadership that they have, and they deserve an opportunity, a real opportunity, not a Rooney Rule opportunity where a box is checked.
The Giants, Broncos, and Dolphins have released statements denying these allegations. And in response to the lawsuit, the NFL also releasing the following statement. The NFL and our clubs are deeply committed to ensuring equitable employment practices and continue to make progress in providing equitable opportunities throughout our organizations. Diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and our internal leadership teams spend more time. We will defend against these claims, which are without merit. We now welcome in former longtime Bengals head coach Marvin Lewis. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Please tell me, what was your reaction to Brian Flores filing this lawsuit?
Well, I obviously gotta be supportive of what Brian is saying. I mean, he's the man that's in this, was put in this position that he felt that he was. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right, and he was used that way, both obviously by the Dolphins, that as hard as we work to win football games, that he's asked to lose football games and compromise himself, his integrity, his staff, his players, and so forth. And then secondly, obviously, with the text messages, this is a direct violation of something the NFL has put in place. That obviously, in Bill's mind at least, decisions had already been made, and him getting that from the teams. And then now Brian gets that and he goes in there. But like he said, he had to go. He had to go and show that he was qualified and have an opportunity to become the head coach.
Marvin.
So again, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marv. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, so I think in those things, it's very obvious. I don't know how those can be disputed.
Marv, when you're a longtime defensive coordinator, clearly in Baltimore, and your first head coaching job and only job in the National Football League was with the Cincinnati Bengals. Did you go through anything similar to this in terms of the hiring practice where you felt like those interviews prior to Cincinnati was just a waste of your time?
Well, I did interview with the Carolina Panthers before John Fox got the job, and I can recall that we had lost to the Steelers in the second round of the playoffs, and I remember sitting home on Monday, and I think it was Chris Mortensen or someone else reported that Foxy would be named the head coach of the Panthers on Friday. And when I went to work Tuesday, Brian came in and said, "Hey, I just got off the phone with Ozzie, and the Panthers want you to come down and interview for the job." I said, "Coach, I just heard last night on TV that they're going to name Foxy the coach on Friday." He said, so he goes back, he talks to Ozzie, talks to the people, and I end up going down to Charlotte and so forth and meeting with the the Richardson family, and they said that wasn't true and so forth, and they named John the head coach on Friday. So I don't know. Again, that's the situation I was in. But you have to go. You have to go and prove that you're worthy to become the head coach. And and it's you're appreciative of the opportunity, but what was supposedly going to happen ended up happening in that case for sure.
Coach Lewis, welcome to the show. Good to see you. Let me get right to
Thank
it
you.
and ask you this. You've seen what he said about the Denver Broncos. You've seen what Brian Flores said about Stephen Ross and what Stephen Ross was trying to, basically impose his will on Brian Flores and get him to do some things that Brian Flores didn't want to do. You've heard what he said about the text message with Bill Belichick and the New York Giants. And you know what's been going on with the National Football League. What do you find most incriminating against the NFL or the league owners or both based on this lawsuit that Brian Flores has filed against the league and those three teams?
To me, I think, obviously that if the Giants had already made a decision, that's the one that stands out. It's right there. It's within the text message. It can't be denied that if that's where the decision had been made, people from both sides had felt that way. Obviously, the GM came out of the Bills organization and so forth, so they would have information leading to that. So to me, that's the one, and that's what's disappointing. That he then finds that out prior to him going there to be interviewed for the position.
Not to really belabor this point because I won't, but we all know where I stand. That I was not a supporter of you staying on as head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals when you were there. But I never
appreciate
said
that. You put me here.
Yeah. No, I didn't. But that's not a bad spot to be with Coach Herm, no doubt about it. But I never once said you did not deserve to be a head coach in the National Football League. I was just thought it was time for a different voice in Cincinnati. Having said all of that, I want to know first, what does it say to you personally that after the Rooney Rule was implemented in 2003, here we are 19 years later, and instead of there being 3 head coaches in the National Football League who happen to be black, as it was the case in 2003, there's only 1 now. I want to know what that says to you. And number 2, I want to know, have you received a call for an interview over the last 3.5 years to be a head coach in the NFL?
Well, I have. I've interviewed for 5 jobs since I left Cincinnati and offered a 6th that I just at that point wasn't ready to do. So, but, I think the thing that going back to that, Stephen A., that I think you have to understand that whatever you say snowballs. And sometimes you don't know the entire situation that these coaches are dealing with within the organization and so forth. And yeah, there may have been time for a new voice, but my voice had to be reinvented a number of different times in Cincinnati. Basically 16 times, but for sure we overhauled things 3 or 4 times within the organization, myself, the staff, and so forth. But the thing that to me is you are 100% correct. We have not had progress. Despite the Rooney Rule, there has not been progress. There's been regression, basically, in the entire thing. So I got young coaches, and part of what I was asked to do and brought on by Octagon to help them with career development, with coaches, with transition from players to coaching and so forth. And these guys are disillusioned right now. These young minority coaches come in my office here at ASU and like, Coach, where do I go? How do I feel good about this day to day when this is happening and I'm seeing what's happening and where is my opportunity and how am I going to get my opportunity? So to me, that's what's disappointing. And I'm trying to encourage these people. We just got to keep chopping wood, got to keep grinding, got to keep doing these things the correct way and then make good. That was my goal, is to make good on these opportunities when they come up for the people that blaze the trail for me.
Marvin, how do we fix it though? Every year we're talking about chopping wood and stay the course and it's gonna happen. Like, how do we finally get over the hump? Other than the obvious, which is really hard, is to buy a team for African Americans and minorities in general. But we need to know an answer to fixing it.
Yeah, I think I wish I could put it into words how to be fixed. I think let's understand this. these coaches that are being brought on and hired, they don't get to bring that player that makes that engine go wherever they are with them. They have to be able to become a leader of men. They have to have the integrity. They have to be believed in that meeting room, that locker room, that auditorium about their leadership abilities, and be able to lead the men, put the plan in place, put the right coaches in place that can help deal with these young people and get and pull the best football out of them, and have to be great coaches and teachers. And we have that. The pipeline is full of that, and they're not being given this opportunity. And I just think they have to be given this whole thing about, I'm going to hire this guy because he coached that guy. Well, that doesn't work. It's less than 50% of that or more, and so the percentage of that are not good. And when you become the head coach, you're the head coach of the entire football team, not necessarily just the offense or the defense.
Well, for
And
me,
and that's the way that works.
I'm going to go back to you for a quick second, and I'm going to call him Coach, Key. I'm going to always call him Coach because it's 23 years in the league, so I'm going to call him Coach, okay? 16 years in Cincinnati, went to the playoffs 5 straight years, 6 times in 7 years. I'm bringing all of that up, Coach, to ask you this question. When you say you had 5 interviews, what Brian Flores described as his experience with the New York Giants, how often did you find that to be your experience over the last 3+ years in the midst of those 5 interviews? And how are you feeling right now as we're sitting here today talking about this subject as an African-American coach who's been around for a long time, won a championship as a defensive coordinator, and still can't find yourself getting another head coaching job in the NFL right now?
Stephen, I haven't been offered any job in the NFL.
I know.
Well,
good. Any job. Oh.
and that's and let me point to Hugh Jackson, who has coached every position on offense but the offensive line, and then came back and coached for me on defense and helped us settle a situation and helped mentor a young first-round draft pick in Drake Kirkpatrick, and never been offered another position coaching in the National Football League. So. In my experience with those interviews, I felt sincere. They were sincere in that. I think when I went to Dallas, I knew that I felt that they, from what I could read and gather, that Mike McCarthy may have been their first choice. But I have to go. I don't know what's going to happen. They also had rumored Mike to be the Giants' maybe first choice. So I have to go. I had a good relationship I had with Stephen Jones after serving on the competition committee with him. So I felt very good about that. I thought they were an excellent football team and one that I felt great about the opportunity to be the head coach of. So, in that situation, I have to go and put my best foot forward and show them that I deserve that opportunity. And so I don't feel bad about that in any way, that way.
Coach, one last thing before we let you go quickly. I heard Ryan Clark say on the 6 o'clock Sports Center, his visceral reaction was, "I'm tired." If you could characterize it in one word, what emotion do you feel when you're reading these allegations and hearing these stories that continue to happen?
I'm very disappointed. I had a long conversation with Vance Joseph Sunday morning. And, when I talk to these coaches around the league, and it's my job I think it's my role to help support them, to help promote them, and help to give them the opportunity to do what I was so fortunate to do for Mike Brown and his family for so long. And so I really feel disappointed for them and frustrated, but we're gonna keep pushing. Key, I don't know what else to do, man. We can't throw in the towel. I can't let the Chris Claibornes of the world and so forth throw in the towel and say that this isn't for me. I got to go do something else. They deserve the opportunity to have the same that Tony, that Denny, Brian Billick, helped me get to this position. Bill Cowher helped me get to this position. So influential in my background that I deserve. I deserve the opportunity, or I take that responsibility to help them.
Yeah. Well, I hope this lawsuit is a catalyst for change as everyone continues to fight the good fight. Coach Marvin Lewis, such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for your perspective. It was illuminating, and please come join us again soon.
All right, Coach.
Thank you.
Still to come on First Take, we are going wall to wall on the new determination regarding his interview process with Denver and New York and his firing last month by Miami. All these teams have negated these claims. There has been a lot of a reaction around the league. Let me read you some tweets. The McCourty twins saying this: Flo has always been a special individual, has been a pivotal part of my career, and I love that I can support him for calling out what we already know. Kenny Stills, the answer is diversity in ownership. Des Bryant writing, I'm going to be real. This gives me courage to speak on my personal situations dealing with the NFL. I never liked how my name got falsely slandered. My narrative was controlled and I had no real guidance. I'm with Brian Flores. Michael Thomas adding, Brian Flores is about to change the game. We're going to bring in a player perspective for this conversation. Jeff Saturday, Kendrick Perkins also here, and Stephen A. Jeff, you got me?
I got you.
Okay, perfect. I want to start with you. How should the players, Jeff, obviously you were involved with the Players Association for many, many years, pivotal. How should they react to this lawsuit?
I think what they're doing now, speaking out, using their voice and their platform to speak out the best they can. I mean, in reality, we've talked about, look, Roger Goodell doesn't have power in this situation. I mean, he's the commissioner of the league. I mean, when you think about what they've tried to establish and what he and Jeff Pash and Troy Vincent have tried to create there in the NFL offices, you can't force it. All you can do is voice your opinion and put it out there and stand with Coach Flores and what he's going through. But ultimately, from a player perspective, it's very difficult in these times. It's the for most guys, it's the off season. We see the kind of the season winding down, and I know we get the Super Bowl coming up. But ultimately, this is man. I'm just telling you, like, this is an ownership issue. All you can do is voice your opinion and your support for what Coach Flores is doing, and ask other coaches to step out in faith and do the same, so that we really can invoke change. But ultimately, it's at the ownership level, and that's the direction that players have to speak to.
Go ahead, KP.
Kendrick, how should the players react, Kendrick?
Well, like they did. But here's the problem that I have. First of all, let me applaud Brian Flores for jumping off the porch one beat. That's not an easy thing to do. That's first thing first. But here's the problem that I have, and this is what we talk about when it comes down to racism, because this is what it's all about, basically, right, in the NFL. And Stephen A., you and I, even you, Molly, we've been on here talking about the NBA hiring more black coaches, which they did an excellent job of doing this past offseason and in these past 2 years. Yeah. But when it comes down to a situation like this, Molly, you just read off a lot of tweets on social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of those tweets, majority or all of them, were from African Americans.
Yes.
In order to start changing the narrative, we got to have white Americans tweet out and support with power, right? So you need the Tom Brady's, you need the Aaron Rodgers, you need the Peyton Mannings, the Eli Mannings. You need those guys to start speaking up and saying it voluntarily, not when they're asked, for example. You know what I mean? So my thing is that the only way that this is going to change is that we need people from other races to step up and start saying things, and not just coming from our own, speaking up for our own. That's why I come at it from a player's aspect.
KP, Kendrick Perkins, appreciate your perspective. Jeff Saturday, always appreciate you, my brother. You know that.
Yes, sir.
Let me say this. I don't disagree with anything that y'all said, except your last sentence, Jeff Saturday, when you said essentially this is all they can do. This is an owner's issue, and all the players could do is let their, speak out. It's not that I disagree with it, but I think that point needs to be illuminated and buffered significantly. And here's what I mean by that, Jeff Saturday. There's a Super Bowl coming up. Last time I checked, there's a whole bunch of black players on the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Rams. I want to emphasize, I'm not advocating that you don't play the Super Bowl, because I'm one of those guys that pay attention to the documentary series that, you see about somebody, Jeff and KP, like Muhammad Ali, where, it's 2 hours and about 20 minutes is on him and his politics, and the other hour and 40 minutes is on him fighting. I'm thinking about Jim Brown, and I'm saying, excuse me, you know what? He stood up, a civil rights activist if ever there was one, and oh, by the way, he played, though. And because he played and because Ali fought, that elevated the significance of their voice when they chose to speak. But I want to also point out this visual. We remember when Ali got exiled from boxing. We remember when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor and Bill Russell and Kurt Flood and Jim Brown and all of these brothers stood. John Wooten and others stood up for Ali while he sat at that table addressing the issue with, Vietnam and not being allowed to box or whatever. Bill Russell was a basketball player. Jim Brown was a football player. Kurt Flood was a baseball player. You understand? You had black athletes speaking out. They didn't leave it up to the individuals in their respective sport. They stood up in unison because they said, this is bigger than us. What is Brian Flores doing? He's saying this is bigger than me. This has been happening. This has been pervasive in the sport of the National Football League for quite some time. You know how many brothers in the NBA are friends with NFL players?
Yeah.
When Odell Beckham Jr. went to Los Angeles, right? Who was singing his praises? Who was telling everybody he was going to wreak havoc? That was LeBron James. That's what he was talking. He don't play football. He plays basketball. But he was speaking about Odell Beckham Jr. The list goes on and on and on where you see professional athletes intermingling with one another. So as black athletes, I'm saying don't limit it. Of course, the NFL players to speak up. Richard Sherman spoke up about this months ago. We know how brilliant and intelligent this brother is. We know how he articulated his concerns about the practices of hiring black coaches within the National Football League. But I'm saying not just the players themselves in the National Football League. The NBA players need to get involved as well because we know they got muscle and they got money and they got a voice. And you got to take into account social justice issues permeated this nation over the last 2 years. What did white America say? We're listening. We want to hear you. And I was the one that came on national television and said the murder of George Floyd, metaphorically speaking, that was what black folks were going off about. It wasn't just about police brutality. It's about the fact that black people religiously have always felt like we've got a proverbial knee on our necks keeping us down. That's what's been going on. This is not a football issue. This is a black athlete issue. This is a black coaches issue. And who gets less support than black coaches? Nobody stands up. I'm talking about literally big time. I'm not talking about just saying something nice and supportive or whatever. Nobody seems to stand up and scream about how these black coaches are denied one opportunity after another. And last but not least, have you seen the job that Monty Williams is doing in the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah.
The leadership, the character, and everything with what that organization is going through, the accusations that were leveled against Ona Sarver, and you still got Monty Williams with the best record in basketball, J.B. Bickerstaff in Cleveland. You got Cleveland, a young squad that's one of the best teams in the NBA right now. You look at Mike Tomlin, 15 years coaching in the NFL, hasn't had one losing season. And he's the only coach. And if he were any place else other than Pittsburgh, you trying to tell me he'd keep his job? He'd have been gone. But because Pittsburgh and the Rooneys are the ones responsible for the Rooney Rule, that's why Mike Tomlin has kept his job. And he hasn't had a losing season in 15 years. It's a problem.
It's egregious.
Got to come together.
Hey, Perk and Jeff, can I tee you guys up on something? Because obviously there's lack of integrity in the hiring, and this has gone on far too long. But something that really stood out to me was the allegations of Stephen Ross asking him to tank, and how that affects the players, how that affects Brian Flores in his future. As a player, I'll start with you, Perk, and then Jeff, if you can jump in. How do you respond to that? How do the players respond to that issue?
Well, it's hard. And what's crazy is, Molly, that's a great question because guess what? It actually happened to one of my brothers that I played with in the NBA, and Kevin Garnett. See, people don't realize that's when things went south with him in Minnesota. Is because they started to ask him not to pay him, but they started to ask him to sit out games because they wanted to tank. Now, it's a completely different situation for us getting paid, but it's almost in the same area, right?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's when KG
and that's
said.
KG.
Yeah,
that's
KG
a huge
said,
name.
who I don't care where we at. I want to play. He's one of those guys that's fully committed to the game. And so when you see things like this, it's almost like, you know what? It's a sign of disrespect. That's what it is. It's a real sign. It's real disrespectful because they basically coming at him and saying, you know what? He's a black guy. I bet you he'll take up on his offer. That's the kind of perception they want to say. Oh yeah, I bet you he'll take this 100,000. He'll take this 100K.
That's a great point. But the other point is, you go to the black coach to do that, then his record is trash, and then you use it as an excuse to justify firing him and basically, compromising his future opportunities because of the record that you assisted or implored him to capture.
I just want, Jeff, I wanted to ask you this, and I appreciate you standing up and speaking because,
Jeff
like I said, coming from you, it sings a different song. But when you look at a guy like a former players that are on the networks like Troy Aikman and Tony Romo, if they're constantly screaming this out about what's going on in the NFL for us black coaches not being hired and things to that nature, Jeff, do you think that sings a different song? Am I right here? Like Tom Brady speaking out, Aaron Rodgers speaking out, like these people of power that got a real voice in a whole nother, culture or different race.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Listen, I think this is, for me, when you talk about the 32 owners of the NFL teams, they ain't listening to many people, right? Like, so to your point, it takes all of us collectively, to singing the same song. And the reality is, it's a joke what's happened in the NFL with having one black head coach. And it's not just that. It's offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, quarterback coaches, general managers, presidents of teams, and all the different, all the different areas of power in our game. And we know that's the pipeline for guys to ascend in organizations. And so, when I look at this, it saddens me that Brian Flores had to step out and do this. I mean, when you think about how helpless this man had to feel, this is a guy who's been at 20 years, man. Like 20 years of sowing and work through the Patriots organization, gets his head coaching job, has a winning record with the Dolphins, even after the owner has allegedly asked you to tank games, and then gets an opportunity to go and interview, and it's alleged that he's, that his interview was basically worthless. Like, how disingenuous and disrespectful is that? And when you think about people, this is not a guy who is going to stand on this without merit. I'm just telling you, I've asked a number of different people around the league and around the game about him and his character and the traits that he carries himself by. This is a stand-up dude, man, and that he's talking about the change that needs to be required of the interview process of itself, the notes that need to be taken, the transparency that needs to go. This is far beyond monetary for him. He understands that he wants hearts and minds of people change. And to your point, Perk, sometimes it takes collective voices, that everybody's singing the same thing. Hey, listen, we need it. And here's the crazy part, is every player I know, we've had, because I was fortunate. I played for Tony Dungy and Jim Caldwell, two black head coaches, went to 2 Super Bowls, by the way, with 2 black head coaches. Hey. So I know how successful these guys, and I'm still champion for Jim Caldwell to get a job. This guy deserves another job in the game. He got fired by Detroit. Unfortunate circumstances that I think were bogus. But at the end of the day, it takes all of us collectively saying it's ridiculous. I mean, open your eyes. You could see it. This is not some kind of thing that's under the rug. This is blatant, out in the open, and that nothing has changed is just frustrating. I can't imagine sitting in the seat of Brian Flores and his family. It's devastating because I can't imagine how helpless this man, and he is gifted, and he is charged to coach, and that he's not getting the opportunity. It should piss everybody off.
I'll end it by saying this because it's so profound, and it really relates to Jeff Saturday and what he just said. Years ago, a Hollywood star told me that ABC was about to do a town hall meeting on the issue of race and racism in the United States. Right. And they wanted him to be a part of it. And he turned it down. And here was the reason. Nothing against ABC whatsoever. He said, I'm tired of black folks being asked about it. Who the hell doesn't know where black people stand on racism? We all know. Right. He said, I'm interested in a town hall where the white folks who are that way have to explain why they think that way, why they act that way, why they behave that way, why they impose or try so hard to impose their wills. Not everybody, because not everybody white is like that. But he said they need to explain, those who are that way need to explain why they are that way. That's where true change takes place. When somebody gets to address them for their iniquities. And in this case with NFL owners, it's some, not all, but it's some of those billionaire owners who clearly don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
They know who they are.
Yes.
In a sense, it's characterized as a black problem, but it's actually a white problem. That's really what all this is. We're up against it. We got to go. I wish we had more time, guys. Still to come on First Take. At the center of the Flores' shocking lawsuit, the New York Giants. How should we feel about them now? After the alleged text by Miami, all those teams have released statements denying those allegations in the lawsuit. Flores alleges that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross attempted to incentivize him to tank shortly after he was hired in 2019, with Ross allegedly offering Flores $100,000 for every loss that season. Additionally, Flores alleges that Ross pressured him into recruiting a prominent quarterback at the end of the 2019 season, which the coach refused so as not to violate the NFL's tampering rules. Here's Flores earlier on Get Up.
You know, that was a conversation about not doing as much as we needed to do to win football games. You know, take a flight, go on vacation. I'll give you $100,000 per loss. Like, those are just the exact words. That's just not in my DNA. That was never going to happen.
So what did you say to him?
That's never going to happen. I didn't come here. Look, I'm always going to try to win. That's who I am. And I owe that to the players in the locker room, but also the support staff that's in the building. I would never do that to them, you know. And at the end of the day, I think it was the reason why I'm no longer there.
On that note, we welcome in Robert Griffin III to the show. And Robert, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And I want you to go wherever you want to go with this. What really stood out to you the most and you're most hot on here with this whole lawsuit?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, first you got to tip your hat to Brian Flores. When you talk about the situation in Miami, where they're asking him, or he's, alleging that they asked him to tank and get paid $100,000 per loss, that's infecting the integrity of the game, right? The players who put in so much time to make it into the NFL, the coaches who put so much time into preparing their players, and then to ask the head coach to not work as hard so that they can maybe get a better draft pick is really just impacting how some people view the game of football. I know the NFL, they preach this when you're a player, when you first get in there, that the integrity of the game means everything. The shield will always protect the shield. And in this case, you hope that the shield starts to protect the legacy, its own legacy of inclusion with black players and black coaches being able to get to the highest level of the coaching ranks. But effectively, I said this yesterday, Brian Flores ended his NFL career as a head coach because of filing this lawsuit. And it's sad because he's doing something that's bigger than himself. And I think everybody would agree that, the NFL kind of avoids hiring black head coaches like some people avoid wearing masks. It could be the best thing for you. It can protect you. But when it comes to NFL coaching, they just don't want to get it done. And I have to say that I don't want to take this away from a guy like Brian Daboll or any other white coaches out there, because they work their tails off to get into positions that they're in, and they have earned those opportunities. But the facts are clear that black coaches are not awarded the same opportunities as their white counterparts, right? Black coaches are they take longer to get hired, they get fired faster, and these NFL organizations, at the end of the day, they're regulated to kind of go through the coaching ranks a second time, and they're looking for that second opportunity to be a head coach after they get fired, kind of like a stimulus check out there. So the way I look at it, when you talk about the facts of the case, Tony Dungy, Jim Caldwell, Brian Flores, all these guys were fired after having a winning season. Steve Wilkes, David Culley were both let go after one season. When you talk about second chances, Anthony Lynn, Todd Bowles, Marvin Lewis, Raheem Morris, Leslie Frazier, Vance Joseph, none of these guys have gotten second opportunities. Jim Caldwell did, but then he got fired for being a winner. So the way that I'm looking at this is, how long do black coaches have to continue to play the good soldier? They're not getting opportunities, and something has to be done about it.
No, absolutely. And unfortunately, Robert, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you giving us all those concrete examples. That was very powerful in all those names. So short interview for us, but very impactful. So appreciate your time. And we hope to have you back soon. And I just want to end this with what he was saying. Brian Flores, the Miami Dolphins started the season 1-7, ended at 8-1. That has never happened in NFL history. So like you alluded to, ending on a high note there. Robert Griffin III, thank you so much for your time. So much more fallout from the lawsuit by Brian Flores against the NFL, with the New York Giants having